You are co-host.
Okay, thank you very much. I think let's start if anybody would. Okay, Swadesh has joined. Hi, Swadesh. How did the conference go?
Hi, it was excellent. The
Okay,
field day
great.
conference
Okay.
at
Yes. So, are you back?
yeah, I back
Okay.
by 17th evening.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Very good. Sorry, we couldn't meet in Delhi. Delhi is anyway a
Yeah,
mess in terms of distances.
yes, sir.
So,
Yeah,
but good. What was this conference about?
that about one is another one is National Women Committee under
Okay.
BWI Building and Woodworkers International. It was
Okay.
organized by that is a global union.
Okay.
Approximately 25 unions are representing in this conference, sir. Different
So,
unions.
so what was the theme of the conference? What
Yeah,
was
that is a main issue. Heat stress and high temperatures are going on in coming days. Future of work.
okay? So climate change,
Yeah,
the impact of climate change on
yeah,
workers. Okay. So
yeah.
the conclusions which come out of this conference, are they lobbied with the governments or what happens typically?
Yeah, they're asking climate justice. Uh, some seva, some they make some intern work in that. Coming days, they lose livelihood because of that
Hmm.
work
Hmm.
hours. In that, they taking some initiative, insurance.
Okay. Okay. So we have, the humanity is in for a big shock in terms of climate change. We all have to kind of work around to see, how to mitigate climate change. See, obviously, climate change is there, whether you accept it or you deny it. We can see from the extreme heat and
Construction workers, yes, sir.
sorry,
Majority of the construction workers working in the open area, the people will directly affect with this heat waves and heat stress. That is the issue,
so
sir.
for the rest of the people, Swadesh had come to Delhi for a conference. So he was
Yeah.
telling me about this particular conference, just to give the context to the rest of the people in the group. There is some student out here whose name is student. Is there a name to this student? There is a student. I hope there is a name to the student. Okay. So there is a student with the name of student. Perfect. So let's start. We were talking last time about soft power, and we had seen how soft power is basically in terms of non-coercive methods, in terms of attraction and appeal. So let's continue that and finish that presentation. Hang on. And we have to go through a particular way. And as I keep repeating, you can stop me at any moment of time to either ask a question or share. We were doing this paper by Ajit Marjumdar on understanding Indian public diplomacy. Now, the interesting part, and a lot of things have happened in terms of Indian diaspora in the last week. The Republican candidate Donald Trump's running mate has a Hindu wife or an Indian American wife who belongs to coastal Andhra. So now we have two dominant parties of America, the Democrats, who has a vice president from Tamil Nadu, and a running mate, the wife of a running mate of the Republicans from coastal Andhra, a Telugu, which itself shows the kind of political power Indian Americans have picked up over a period of time. The Indian diaspora is today one of the biggest. both in terms of numbers, in terms of remittance. In fact, there is a future unit in terms of remittance. We will see how the remittance have changed. The interesting part is the Indian diaspora is not a unity actor. Can you hear my voice? Guys, can you see the screen and hear my voice?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
It's okay.
Okay, perfect. Hang on. Wait it. Okay. Sorry, the mouse is also not giving a problem. So the Indian diaspora is not a unitary actor. Okay, perfect. Maintained through endogamous social patterns of settlement and their resistance to cultural assimilation. In fact, that's one of the reasons the Indian diaspora did maintain a certain, cultural segregation. Until early 90s, India did not pursue any meaningful engagement with the Indian diaspora. Even when we say they did not, there was some amount of engagement. For example, in 48, Indian Foreign Secretary uh, talked about finding out people of Indian descent, their number, employment, economic and political position, treatment, all relevant matters. But the state itself had no policy or no recognition in terms of diaspora. But that's not just about the Indian state. Across the world, because there was the in fact it was only globalization, the faster transportation and the interconnectivity which got various states in the world to understand the power of diaspora in terms of in terms of public diplomacy, in terms of soft power. Their contribution to formulation of Indian policy has been marginal historically. That's because there was no connection, there was no understanding of the power of diaspora. India's economic liberalization changed that. In fact, in a subsequent, the next unit that we are going to be taking in terms of how diaspora influenced foreign policy, it was actually when the connectivity and the globalization happened, did the diaspora started talking to the elites in India and saying, what kind of policies are you? So today also, if you see, there's a major pressure which happens from the diaspora in terms of people saying what is happening. For example, if you see there has been a spate of rail derailments, and you can see that on social media suddenly people are questioning what is going on, what is the railway minister doing, or what is this doing, what is happening on the infrastructure. This kind of it creates pressure on the state or the politicians to deliver. Economic liberalization changed this pattern. In fact, liberalization itself was the result of a lot of diaspora pressure on the Indian elites to change their policies. As India looked to diaspora to boost economic growth, like the Chinese diaspora played, early 90s initiated the Look East policy to revive relations with Southeast Asia, long historical, cultural, and economic relations through Indian subcontinent, South region. There was SARC. Unfortunately, SARC itself could not, move forward too much. The SARC got hijacked between the rivalries of India and Pakistan, and the rest of the states were too small. And now there is this major influence of China, which is coming in. I was reading about how various diasporas influence each other's countries. We shall look at in the next unit how national security and foreign relations are influenced by diaspora. Okay, in 2003, the then Indian External Affairs Minister Yashwant Sinha, modernizing countries' foreign policy, people of Indian origin are extremely important. And obviously, with globalization, with interconnectivity, the policymakers did understand the fact. And as remittances started rising, listen, with the rising of remittances, the diaspora and the acquiring of political power by the diaspora, they started pushing for their voice to be heard. And it made sense for the local economy, local media, and the local elites to listen to those voices because now these diasporas were powerful. So, for example, in a democracy, the people who vote and the number of people who vote can actually change policy formulations because now they are a voting bloc. Similarly, because diasporas were remitting and they were picking up economic and political power outside, their voice needed to be heard. Soft power is based on the spread of its culture by the diaspora, was steadily gaining significance in the overall scheme of the country's diplomacy. Such a large population outside uh, having a connection with the host land obviously made sense. uh, Diasporas, which long been stigmatized as brain drain, was getting recognized as an intellectual power, whether it was Sam Pitroda spreading. Yeah, a lot of youngsters, especially in the country, do not know that it was during the reign of Rajiv Gandhi. Sam Pitroda came in, and uh, till that particular time, to do a normal ISD call or an international call was a nightmare, and suddenly this new services of STD, subscriber trunk dialing, and international subscriber dialing became easy. Raghuram Rajan working on monetary policy, Shashi Tharoor contributing to Indian diplomacy in the United Nations, so on and so forth. So these were all people who were diasporas, and they contributed big time. Social media as a soft power tool. New web portal for public diplomacy in 2006. Later uploaded YouTube videos, pictures on Facebook page, Twitter account. And this was basically because this was the time when social media started coming into play. Indian government uses Facebook boosters to send regular post on policy, adapt in using information technology, tweet on International Day of Yoga was followed by 20 million people worldwide. So obviously, and this is not just India, every state is using social media as a public policy or a public diplomacy tool now. According to Ian Hall, 5 new developments can be identified in what he terms as the new Indian public diplomacy since 2000. Efforts to reach out, building connections, foreign aid and development program, promoting events to showcase a national brand India, and using new social media to reach out to younger generation. The foreign ministry also has a Young India Connect where they train people. There's a website. 2006, at an annual meeting of World Economic Forum, India launched Brand India campaign. In fact, New York Times wrote Delhi swept in today. India was the flavor of the season. Things have changed subsequently. A lot of things have changed. The whole world is in a turmoil right now. Few examples of exemplary work by members of Indian community. Kanakshi Khimji, whose great grandfather migrated to Oman. Big business group. Although a Hindu, Kanakshi was conferred the title of Sheikh by Omani Sultan. So in the Gulf, a lot of these people from Kerala, from down south, have done phenomenal. In fact, now people from north are also reaching the Gulf. Then there was Ela Gandhi, granddaughter of Mahatma Gandhi, born and lives in South Africa. Dr. Pratima Kale, born in Mumbai, migrated to US, president and CEO of International Institute of Rural Research. In fact, today, global technology companies, a lot of them are headed by Indians. Sundar Pichai, Nadella, Nouri in Pepsi. We have a vice president, American vice president, who's an American Indian, uh, renowned for her work on the issues of rural development, that is Pratima Kale. Summing up, Buddhism originated in India, propagated around during the colonial Indian labor were transported. Indian artists to display their talent abroad. In fact, diaspora is a major force today to display talent abroad. Establish training institutions, performing arts are encouraged. Foreigners are attracted by diversity and richness. Facets of national culture form an important component of and is now quite influential in their host country or needs to be managed. Because this diaspora is not a unitary actor, obviously to manage this diaspora is the biggest challenge. To govern this diaspora becomes the biggest challenge. And that is why sound policies are needed. In the absence of policies, ad hocism happens, which leads to many issues. Okay, there are some references. BBC News report, Yoga, Raja Mohan, Indian diaspora and soft power. Indian soft power, a new foreign policy strategy. In fact, there's a whole book on this by Routledge. So that was about soft power. Let me now hang on. Let me now bring in the next presentation. Sorry. Let me bring in the next presentation. Just a sec. Any questions on the soft power thing? If we are continuing with this impact of diaspora on foreign policy and national security. Uh, just a sec. I have to go through a particular way. Okay. Okay. Are you able to see my new presentation, impact of diaspora on foreign policy and national security? Guys?
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. So, in continuation of the soft power, self-learning unit, let's look at the impact of diaspora and foreign policy. And no better way to start it by this Economist article. And this is an article from June 12th, 2023, just last year. A year back, India's diaspora is bigger and more influential than any in history. In fact, I was seeing a US census or some, tabulation where the highest earner today are the American Indians. The medical Indian treatment in India, we can consider it soft power diplomacy because many people from many countries are coming for the purpose. Absolutely, Domingos. In fact, the Indian medical fraternity, in terms of the doctors, the infrastructure, is far superior than a lot of global South countries. In fact, not just global South. The cost of doing treatment in India is much cheaper for the Westerners than what they would, have to spend in their own countries. In fact, a lot of Indians who go out to the Western countries because of their children or other things, say the same thing. To get a routine treatment is so much cheaper in India than doing it in the US, Canada, or Europe. So yes, that's also a part of the soft power. Absolutely. Thank you, Domingos. For people who do not know, Domingos is from Mozambique. And in fact, last time, for people who were not there last time in the last class, Domingos did a presentation on Mozambique and how there are almost 1,000 to 1,500 people from Mozambique who annually come to India for treatment. And that's why possibly he's talking about treatment. Besides treatment, Domingos, as you had mentioned, education. A lot of students from Africa and other countries come to India for education, which is also a point in terms of quality and accessibility to education. So that becomes a soft power. So this particular news item tells the case in point in terms of diaspora. So objectives are influence of Indian diaspora on foreign policy and threat. And remember, because it's not a unitary actor, there are threats which are evolved, and especially listen in terms of global geopolitics, there is a whole lot of things which come in. I was reading this Twitter thread today. I don't know the source. I cannot verify it, but there was this whole thread on how China is influencing Bangladesh politics using the help of Pakistan in rising. There has been a lot of anti-establishment protests and coercion in Dhaka by the Dhaka University students, and they were talking about how in this exchange program, students are going into China, and then how the Chinese are influencing this protest in Dhaka. Now, again, these are unverified sources. I do not know. But, inevitably, anything can influence anything, any other state or non-state actor because of globalization, because of the interconnectivity and the movement. So the threat, how the diaspora can be a threat. So, for example, in the United Nations International Migration Report, India in 2015 had 16 million individuals born in the country but living outside. Total, in terms of people born and outside and people of Indian origin are almost 31 million. This is a 100% increase from 8 million in 2000. So obviously, people are going outside, going across the world, settling out there. And this is what I was talking about. I picked this up from a blog, and the writer of this blog, without being named, hang on, yes, sir. Now, Ministry of Education in India announced programs study in India are coming. Many students from Africa influenced by the program of students getting 50% scholarship. Domingos is sharing that. And in fact, that's what he had shared last time also. About 500 to 600 Mozambique students from Mozambique are studying in various universities in India. So this was, an anonymous post because the writer was not there, but from the post, it was very clear that the writer was an influential person with the government, and they talked about how these elites experience firsthand. So the diaspora experienced firsthand when they went abroad the disjunction between their sense of India's ancient culture and glory and India's economic policy that led to a situation where for youngsters, the India that is today is so much different from the India before the 90s when the economic liberalization happened. I don't think so. The current lot of Indians, the millennials and the Gen Z, can really recognize the India that was in the 90s. There is so much things which have changed. So this guy is talking about how the diaspora talked about the worst kind of psychological situation where you have a superiority complex and an inferior status. In fact, one of the things politically, what the ruling party and the prime minister keep talking about, the pride of Indians today. Now, that's a political statement, but nevertheless, there was, this talk about India's oldest civilization and the disjunct between the oldest civilization and the economic policy used to hurt a lot of Indians earlier. Indian diaspora seriously brought home to these elites the fact that these policies had little rationale. And obviously, today also, when we look at a lot of policies, we don't see a rationale to it. And today, the diaspora is able to shout because of its economic and political power. They lived often in countries where Indian policies would have been laughed out of court. So this was a blog, this was an independent opinion, but I thought it made sense. But this makes, in the real world, how Indian diasporas affects its role in a multipolar Middle East. So I have, in this particular unit, rather than pick up from your SLM, self-learning module, I have picked up real life example. And I thought that made a lot of sense because SLM is something that you can read, but this is what really will make you understand things. So this is June 2017 article. And at that time, there was a fracturing of relation between Qatar and Saudi Arabia. I think the relations are still fractured in a particular way. It is a geopolitical thing. India's presence in the Gulf is distinctly shaped by its massive expat community. India's foreign minister first response was to state that Delhi's priority was helping stranded Indian workers. So Indians, there is a huge Indian diaspora in the Gulf, provides an unassuming asset to New Delhi. A unique soft power advantage improves India's image. It constitutes an added burden that can restrict Delhi's strategic option. Because, and if you remember, there was this case about this in Air India plane getting hijacked to Kandahar. It was a Nepal India flight. Now, when this plane got hijacked, while the policymakers were deciding on, how to go about releasing the passengers, the relatives of these passengers started protesting, and this was during the New Year's time, just on the onset of New Year's. That created so much of a pressure to the policymakers that they relented, and they released certain terrorists in exchange for the hostages. So inevitably, whenever you have a large expat force, the pressures on policy make, and in the absence of a watertight policy, will lead to ad hocism and additional burden which restricts Delhi's strategic options. That's why this statement is coming, numbering between 7 and 8 million. These are old numbers, been important to the country's economic and its policy, main source of expat remittance. It's a great source of expat remittances. And 15-16, they were 35.9 billion. Today, I think overall expat remittances are up in the tune of 80 billion. New Delhi's interest is no longer restricted to economic transactions of selling labor and buying oil, to raise its global stature, strategic and security interest in Middle East, deploy several diplomatic tools, including soft power. So this is how the article goes. So I'm bringing out certain salient points of the article. Presence of diaspora helps to anchor bilateral relations. Now, what typically happens is, irrespective of the fact that between state to state, if there is some amount of discord or non-syncing, the diaspora steps in to lobby for certain amount of syncing to happen, both ways, in the host country as well as the home country. This provides tangible benefits, making it easier for Middle East government to justify to their population the expansion of ties with Delhi in sensitive areas like defense cooperation. So if you notice today, the present government has departed from the earlier government's, dealing the Middle East, especially the Israel-Palestinian affairs. The earlier governments were more closer to the Palestine cause, and now present government has openly come and sided with Israel. And yet, if you notice, the Indian government is balancing its act in the Israel-Palestinian conflict. In fact, I was reading about how certain economic aid has gone to the Palestinian recently, in spite of the fact that Indians picked up, young people who have gone to work in Israel, built upon cements and acts as a present reminder to the public in the midst of the historical and cultural links. Kerala and other Western Indian states, largest provider of labor to the Gulf. Now, this becomes indispensable because of such a big expat population. In fact, a lot of Gulf countries work with Indian labor. What happens if there is a fracturing of relation and the state losing so much of labor force? So now there is this interdependence. The globalization has led to this interdependence. So, in spite of the fact there could be identity politics which get played out, but then there is a larger economic, fraction or faction which does not destabilize. So, for example, the US, in spite of the political rhetoric by, one of the parties on against immigrant, the immigrants still continue to come in the US because the whole US economy is run by immigrants. So the state has to kind of balance it out between the politics and the economics. Kerala, of course, has a history of relatively peaceful Muslim Hindu Christian relation. Remember, Kerala has been always the landing port for a whole lot of people who first came to India, and obviously all these religions thrived, contribute to India's soft power, independent of government policy, providing a steadfast anchor in relation unaffected by policy shifts. For example, UPA government has been low-key with regard to ties with Israel, but NDA brought the relationship out. In spite of these changes, the local is, the local exigencies is able to balance it out. So rather than a fallout, they are able to balance it out. Assurance to the population in the region that India is a long-term partner. Importance of good international relations for national security. So why this becomes a very important? Modern world is interdependent and interconnected. So when the Ukraine-Russian conflict happened, there were 40,000 students inside Ukraine, and they had to be brought out. And that's where the foreign policy, diplomacy skills come into the picture, where you try and maintain relation with the opposing factions. Similarly, we happened when the Iraq-Kuwaiti war happened, or various places where conflicts happened, how the Indian state is able to tightrope walk and get those Indians out. An adverse security situation in any part of the world may affect other nations too, if not directly connected, needs political and diplomatic handling. And that's where diasporas come in with their soft powers. There was this again a case study in 71. There was this refugees we started coming in from East Pakistan. Remember, Bangladesh was earlier East Pakistan. There was a lot of a tumult which happened. There was a political strife. These refugees came in West Bengal, Assam, and Tripura. That time, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi had this diplomatic efforts, visited US. US was favoring Pakistan over India. And then Indira Gandhi visited Soviet Union. That time there was a Soviet Union, the USSR. The USSR broke into Russia much later. USSR used its veto power. You know how you have to walk tight, do this tightrope walking in terms of political skills and diplomacy to get your part of what you want to be done. So that is the reason why this non-aligned movement, which India was a part of and not aligning with any particular power, helped India overcome, since independence till today. So US had dispatched a naval fleet. In fact, India-United States civil nuclear agreement was a prime example of persistent diplomacy, international relation, and this was lobbied by the Diaspora group. Agreement allows India to import nuclear fuel equipment and technology without signing the non-proliferation treaty and the comprehensive nuclear transfer. This was a major diplomacy, flag which the Prime Minister Manmohan Singh was able to fly for India, this civil nuclear agreement in 2008. And this was a lot of work was done by the Indian diaspora. Participation by Indian diaspora in electoral politics. By 20th century, Indian diaspora had started participating in local, state, and national level electoral. This is in host states. This was typically in host states. America is a prime example where Indians today there were in fact 3 Indian candidates who were running for presidency from Republicans. Acceptance by the indigenous community as positive contributors overseas Indian and not only gained good economic status as high quality qualified professionals and intellectuals. So that is why that is the reason why the diaspora, because Indian diaspora is one of when they went with the British as indentured labor, they have a long standing in those host countries. Indian rose from just being migrants to taking mantle of political retreat, was not only in other parts but in developed world. We Britain, the colonizers of India, just had an Indian British Prime Minister who recently, just last month, in fact this month only, got voted out of power. He was leading the Tory party. So you can see the ultimate reverse thing which happened, that the people who colonized India, an Indian was a prime minister there. The first leader of Indian origin to lead a government was the Chedi Jagannath, who became Prime Minister of Guyana in 53. Mauritius, including the present incumbent, is an Indian. Mauritius is 60% Indians. Prime Minister of Portugal, Antonio Costa, was the first person of Indian ancestry to head a European state. Rishi Sunak was the other person. Leo Varadkar, who became Prime Minister of Ireland in 2017, UK, many members of the VP of USA is the Indian origin. So, interestingly, Indian diaspora is there across the world. Fiji is another example where Indian community has faced strong opposition. Mahindra Chaudhary took over as Prime Minister in 1999, was deposed in a military coup. And that's where Indian diplomacy tries to maintain a balance between maintaining relations with the country and expressing solidarity with the Indian community for and seeking their safety. So the Indian and remember, because of this big diaspora, obviously the pressures on the Indian state is higher. Other countries with a smaller diaspora are able to manage, and that is why when a lot of times people say that policy to make a policy to to create a playing field where everybody seems to be happy is a very difficult task, considering the fact that there are so many pulls and pressure from various diasporas. Used to in earlier overseas Indians, especially US and UK, used to contribute to Indian Lok Sabha state elections by the way of donations. They did not vociferously express their opinion, but this has changed in the 21st century. So now you see the diasporas vociferously expressing their opinion. In fact, many a times I've heard many Indians in India wondering why these guys, why the diasporas are having an opinion about India. And I've heard a lot of people say if they have so much opinion, why do they come to India? But that's not the case. So they still have a connection with India. They and obviously they get something economically or otherwise for which they stay outside, but the connection is here, and now they have a voice with social media and they are very much connected with it. So you can see the Indian diaspora celebrating India's World Cup victory in cricket in US and other countries, and they are loud today. Have started playing a larger role in opinion building and lobbying for a particular individual or party. Good use of social media to reach Indian masses. We have a vlogger by the name of Dhruv Rathi who stays in Germany, who was a major influence during the elections of 2024. He was making videos, reels, talking about a particular ideology. So you see, and he's not just the only one. There are enough diaspora who are lobbying in the back home. 2008, the government established a non-profit trust called the Indian Development Foundation, which closed in March 31st, 2018. This was it seemed to be a good idea in terms of getting Indians to engage in philanthropy, but the trust has been closed for whatever reasons. Many institutions of higher learning receive funds and donations from alumni who are diaspora. In terms of natural disaster, the diaspora contributed funds for rehabilitation. Now, all these also has a negative effect. The negative effect is transnationalism impacts national security when funds are channeled to create disturbance. Inevitably, remember, human beings have various motives. Besides human beings having a motive, there could be non-state actors or state actors who would want a certain amount of disturbance to happen for their geopolitics, secessionist movement. For example, as I said, I was reading on social media about how China is creating these disturbances in Bangladesh. Again, these are unverified sources. Unless there is research which happens, how, why, what happens, is it disturbance in Bangladesh specifically politically, or is it a factor to affect India? Geopolitics works in a myriad ways. Large sections of communities as abroad, especially Canada, UK, US, Tamil diaspora supported LTTE in the separation war against Sri Lanka. Remember, the whole concept of LTTE came in when Sri Lanka modified its constitution to segregate the Tamils, which was an Indian diaspora community which had gone there as indentured labor, to deprive them of political and other benefits. And then there was this armed struggle. In fact, the Indian political environment was affected because of this war in Sri Lanka. And then I see this article, Indian Identity Politics. So now, not only there is a forward thing from diaspora back home, it goes a reverse way in terms of home politics affecting diasporas. And because of this globalization, because of this transnationalism, nationalism connections, things move back and forth. It's a two-way street. It's not a one-way street. So that is why, and unfortunately, what typically happens is when politicians go and do identity politics, how it affects various sections in a transnationalism space is not being able to be comprehended by various people. And things move back and forth in quite myriad ways. There is something called a chaos effect which works. So one needs to be very careful because, say, for example, when US, goes after, or Europe goes after immigrants, how it works in terms of their foreign relations. Unfortunately, Europe and the US does not have this big diaspora. India's diaspora is able to handle these disruptions. So identity politics has reached diaspora in the US. There's a lot of ferment in the US in terms of the identity politics. Yet India's diaspora across the West is today deeply polarized across religion, caste, even age, with recent radical changes in Indian policy, which has thrown India's national character into a state of turmoil. So it goes back and forth, and obviously some sort of an equilibrium does come into the picture, but yes, it is influencing the diasporas there. For example, in June this year, I think this was last year's, California Department of Fair Employment filed a complaint against Cisco, a technology company, for discrimination against the Dalit. In fact, parties now having separate, wings to influence various sections of the diaspora. And today we are seeing, for example, the Democrat vice president candidate is a Tamilian Brahmin, whereas the vice president designate from Republicans has a Andhraite Telugu wife. So how it works out. This is the first time a civil rights case has been filed by the US government on the cost of caste discrimination. And the case has shed spotlight on an issue that one rarely hears about in that country, in US. So the caste politics have reached the US shores. And obviously, this is being heard for the first time, but I'm sure this was there earlier, have not gone unnoticed among American politicians. Republicans launched 4 separate coalitions to woo different sections of Indian diaspora, because diaspora is not a unitary actor, including 3 specifically for targeting Hindus, Sikhs, and Muslims separately. So, in spite of the fact it's a huge diaspora, does major remittances, yet this identity politics is dividing the diaspora to the detriment of India's foreign policy. Because now those politicians are also seeing these divisions, and they will be tapping onto these divisions for their own advantage and to the disadvantage of the country. The political fragmentation along identity lines has significant consequences for India's foreign policy. In fact, India's diaspora has been New Delhi's greatest and influential asset, but as it splinters along lines of religion, caste, and age, highly polarized views at home, it'll become less cohesive and effective as a lobby. And this always was, a problem which would come in, but that's the way it is. In fact, I picked up this article from 2022 in the Diplomat, India's woeful diaspora policy. So, Domingos, every state and a state like India, obviously, with this kind of a big diaspora, the policy will always look woefully short. So every country would try, and today, with the way the world is moving in terms of media, in terms of transnationalism, in terms of globalization, inevitably the state will always be slower to make policies than how transnationalism will happen. And so, nevertheless, I picked up this article. I wanted to share it with you. There's this article. You can go to the Diplomat and read about why they feel it is woefully short. I assume the fact that to contain interest of so many different diasporas, and then inevitably there is a certain fragmentation, obviously in terms of age, in terms of caste, in terms of religion, in terms of region. So a centralized policy always would become woefully short. So, okay, let's sum up. Diaspora provides a human dimension, play a unique role in international relations to influence a country's foreign policy without coercion or the use of hard power. It can be under threat from elements of diaspora who are supportive secessionist movement and other actively into national interests. Recent times, Indian government has officially declined when diaspora can be act as a tool, a sounding board to gauge local sentiments about Indian politics. So, and there are some references to the elephants dance, Indian diaspora influence on general election. In fact, Diplomat has quite a few stories on how the diaspora influence foreign policy. There's a book by Shashi Tharoor, Pax Indica, India and the World in the 21st Century. Okay. I think I'll stop out here. Any questions? Anything that you wish to add? Any questions? Anything that you would like to, if there are any links that you come across, do share it among your group so that people can read. Again, as I said, there are multiple perspectives to it. And when you read various perspectives, then understanding a topic becomes much more easier. This particular SLM, in fact, a lot of last SLM also, I picked a lot of information from outside. In fact, I was not very satisfied with the last SLM on soft power. The way it was written, that's why I picked up a whole paper by Abhijit Majumdar on public diplomacy about how soft power is being used. So, in case you wish to have this presentation from me, you can send me a mail at my mailing address. It is duck.com. Hang on. If you send me a mail, I can send you the presentation. That's my email ID. Any questions, anything you'd like to add? Sanjeev, why is it tough to understand? Because
somehow I'm unable to understand, sir.
So understand some basic facts, Sanjeev. Soft policy is basically a non-coercive policy in terms of appeal and attraction. So what is India's appeal and attraction? India's appeal and attraction can start with people in terms of branding. For example, Gandhi, Nehru. So if you see lately, when the current prime minister is traveling to countries and you have a joint press conference, inevitably the foreign dignitary always brings out the contribution of Gandhi or India's first prime minister Nehru in the bilateral affairs. So as people, they are great brands. Vivekanand is a great brand because Vivekanand was brought India on the global stage in terms of religion. So they are people. Besides that, what is India known for? Bollywood. What is
Yeah.
India known for? Yoga. What is India known for? Culture in terms of dance, in terms of music. The fact that Beatles, collaborated with this Indian guru, then spices. Indian curry is supposed to be known worldwide.
Yeah.
So when we look at, so now see how America influenced its soft policies. What was the soft power of America? The American lifestyle. What is the American lifestyle? American lifestyle is hamburgers. American life is Kentucky Fried Chicken. American lifestyle is American music, Hollywood. These are all soft powers. Today,
Yes.
most people in India understand America out of the Hollywood movies that they see, and they think that is America. But America is not that. That's just a representation or a presentation of America. Similarly, a lot of Indians, earlier, the Indian movies or Bollywood would make movies on poverty, on issues, real
Yes.
issues. Karan Johar and his gang or the ilk made movies which suddenly shows opulence, as though India is a different country altogether. So, and religion, for example, India's spirituality, Buddhism started in India, Jainism started in India. All these things are soft powers which are able to appeal or attract people from across the world. So look at the
People,
fact
people,
today,
people in the sense.
so for example, look at the fact today, let me give you a current example. Mukesh Ambani's son got married last week.
Yes.
The Ambani wedding has been on for a month. Why do you think the Ambani wedding was on for a month where they were spending about 5,000 crores? This was a giant PR activity, a soft power activity
Okay.
for the Reliance Group,
Yes.
where Mark Zuckerberg was called, where all the ex UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, Tony Blair were there for the marriage, where Rihanna had come to sing, Rema from Nigeria had come to sing. Now the fact is, look at the fact. In Nigeria, Rema is supposed to be the musician. Now Rema comes and performs in a Ambani wedding. All his fan following follows that he's performing in India. Where is he performing? Ambani. Who's Ambani? Ambani is Reliance.
Yes. Yes.
Reliance is a company. Look at the soft power.
Yes.
So this is how the soft power travels, and soft power basically then attracts people. See, what are you looking in terms of global diplomacy? You're looking at people from world over to, let's say, travel to India, because once they travel to India, they will give foreign exchange into India and spend money. Then on top of that, if there is a conflict somewhere, then India is known, and then the Indian state can put his influence to try and take care of the Indians. Saji, are you
Yes,
getting
sir.
it?
Yes, sir.
So that is what soft power is.
Okay.
And India has all the components of soft power. It has to use those components to get to people to understand India and to do, say, for example, today when a lot of news happens in terms of lynching, in terms of hate crimes, people get wary of India.
Yes.
But then the soft power comes and says, oh, this happens, killings happen in the US also, murders are happening in the US also. But, there is the Hollywood, and America is the land of opportunity.
Sir.
That's how soft power balances out the negative image of a country.
Okay.
Okay?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. Any other question? Okay. In case none, great. Have a great weekend. Have a wonderful week ahead. We will meet next Saturday at 3 o'clock, and we'll take up the unit on remittances, the SLM on remittances, and meet you next Saturday at 3 o'clock. Bye-bye then.
Thank you, sir.
Bye, guys.